The fork hit the plate with a sharp clang. My dad's hand froze in midair, his knuckles turning pale, the color draining from his face. Just seconds ago, brunch had been loud, cheerful, and ordinary, until my grandfather, his voice trembling but warm, smiled across the table and said, "I'm glad you're enjoying the apartment I bought you." The words slipped out of me before I could stop them, quiet but cutting. "I live in a basement." Laughter died instantly. My cousin's glass paused mid-sip, my mom's eyes flicked straight to my dad, and the entire room seemed to hold its breath. I hadn't planned to humiliate him like that, not then, but sometimes the truth claws its way out, raw and undeniable. Growing up, I trusted him. He was the dad who carried me on his shoulders at parades, who promised I'd always be taken care of. And when I started college, Grandpa proudly told me he'd bought me an apartment, a place of my own, security, a future. But I never saw it. Dad told me the paperwork was complicated. He said he'd handle it for me, said I should just focus on school. I believed him. For years, I believed him. Meanwhile, I lived in a damp basement where mildew crept through the walls and rats scratched behind the pipes at night. I worked shifts between classes just to pay bills. Every time I asked about the apartment, Dad brushed me off with a new excuse. But the cracks showed. The flashy new car he suddenly drove, the vacations he and Mom bragged about, the way my sister, the golden child, started hinting she had her own investment property. I didn't need a confession. The truth was already written between the lines. He'd taken the apartment, my inheritance, my stability, and thought I'd be too naive, or too loyal, to figure it out. He was wrong. I didn't scream. I didn't explode. I planned. For weeks I gathered documents, property records, bank transfers, screenshots of texts, where he dismissed me. I traced the deed, sitting under his name instead of mine. Step 1 was knowing the truth. Step 2 was waiting for the right moment. My birthday brunch gave me both. When Grandpa asked that question, it was the trigger. And when I dropped that quiet truth into the room, I knew what would come next. The silence wasn't just tense, it was surgical. Grandpa's smile slipped, his hand trembling as he set down his coffee. "What do you mean, basement?" he asked. I met his eyes. "I never got the apartment. I've been renting a basement since college." Every head turned to Dad. His mouth opened, then shut, stammering. Sweat broke across his forehead. I let the pause stretch, choking him like a noose. Then I reached into my bag and pulled out an envelope I'd brought just in case. Inside were copies of the deed, bank statements, proof. I slid it across the table. Grandpa's shaky hands flipped through the pages, his lips tightening with every line. When he looked up, the disgust in his eyes was sharper than I'd ever seen. "You stole from your own child." The words cracked like a gavel. My mom gasped. My sister went pale. Dad mumbled excuses about protecting assets, about family investments. I didn't argue. I didn't need to. The evidence spoke louder than anything I could say. Brunch dissolved into shouting, accusations, tears. Dad's voice rose, pleading, desperate. I sat there calm, steady, watching. Because I knew the real blow hadn't even landed yet. 3 days earlier, I had already filed the paperwork to transfer the apartment back into my name. Since Grandpa had originally bought it for me, I had leverage, and once my lawyer saw the fraud, he moved quickly. By the time Dad even tried to cover his tracks, it was already too late. The apartment was gone from his grip. The final act was quiet. A week later, movers carried my few belongings out of that dingy basement and into the apartment that had always been meant for me. Sunlight poured through tall windows, hardwood floors shining under my feet. Meanwhile, Dad faced Grandpa's fury, the family's disappointment, and the quiet collapse of his authority. My sister cut him off completely. My mom cried behind closed doors. And me? I finally had peace. Sometimes I wonder if Dad lies awake at night, haunted by the sound of that fork hitting the plate, the moment the truth he buried clawed its way into daylight. But that weight isn't mine anymore. Betrayal cuts deepest when it comes from family. But justice? Justice is sweeter when it's carved out of their arrogance. I don't need his apology. I don't need his approval. I have the apartment. I have the proof. And every time I unlock that door, I remember the look on his face when silence destroyed him. That silence was the best birthday gift I could have asked for.